oh my God, we've got to do something about the debt ceiling or we're all going to die. So, this is another video on this dog and pony show that they do periodically about the debt ceiling, because it's not over with, folks. This is going to come back to haunt us in December again. So I'm going to change this around. I'm going to say, what is the debt ceiling and why should you care about it? Because I wanted to turn it into a question, because the answer is simple. You shouldn't. Ignore this stuff. It's just a shell game, a stupid dog and pony show that they trot out every once in a while to try and distract you from what is really going on. Oh my gosh, we've got a pandemic. Don't look at that. We've got the debt ceiling. Governments have overreached all across the planet and they're trying to control all of their ceilings. But don't look at that. We've got the debt ceiling. We just lost a war and all of these very, very expensive weapons have fallen into the hands of our enemies. But don't look at that. We've got the debt ceiling. So let's take a closer look at this and see what's happened in the past. I want to read you something. Mountain of debt. On March 16th, 2007, Congress passed a bill to increase the debt ceiling on the national debt from $8.2 trillion to $9 trillion. But as I'm writing this, just a few months later, the debt is already $8.98 trillion, and Congress has just approved the fifth increase on the debt ceiling in the last 6 years, raising it to $9.8 trillion. This $850 billion increase should last another few months, and it's entirely possible that the national debt could surpass $10 trillion by the end of 2008. Well, guess what? It was $10.7 trillion by the end. This means that a baby born in the U.S. as a U.S. citizen in 2007 comes into the world owing approximately $30,000. Well, that baby is now 14 years old now and owes about $90,000, and it still isn't of working age yet. If it finishes high school, it's got another 4 years to go, and this $90,000 will have probably doubled at the rate they're spending it these days. Will have probably doubled by then. And if he or she goes to college and spends another 4 to 6 years in college, then you can double that figure again. So we're getting toward the end of this scenario that we're going through. What's all that from? It's from my book, Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver. So, the debt ceiling, an explainer by the White House. So this is from the White House's website. And there are many different types of Treasury debt. And it says ranging from a few days to a few years, all the different notes, bills, and bonds. And the United States has not run an annual surplus since 2001. I debunked this in a previous video. My definition of surplus or deficit is how much did we owe at the beginning of the year? How much do we owe at the end of the year? And if we owe less, there was a surplus. If we owe more, there was a deficit. This is very simple accounting. A child can do this, but not the U.S. government. And so in 2001, we ended the year owing $18 billion more than we started the year. So what is the debt limit? The debt limit is a ceiling imposed by Congress on the amount of debt the U.S. federal government can have outstanding. This is important because this is a lie. It's a limit on the amount of debt that the government can have outstanding. That would mean at any moment. This limit has been set at $28.4 trillion since August 1st of 2021. So this is less than 75 days ago. Now, the president wants to point out here that Congress and that prior years, by prior Congresses and administrations, in fact, they've spent 97% of the current national debt items. So that's what we're paying for. But that's since January of 2021. So we've had a little over 9 months of spending that totals 3%. It's already over 3%. By the end of the year, it'll be like 4 or 5% of the national debt. And that's every year. And, this is just since January of 2021. Now, we're going to go to another one of these releases by the White House where we're going to contradict what we have just said. So remember that, going back to this one, that it's a limit on the amount of debt that the U.S. federal government can have outstanding. So here, the president wants to thank all of these people and organizations for joining me today to talk about the need to raise the debt limit. We haven't failed to do that since our inception as a country. We need to act. These leaders know the need to act. What? The United States pays its bill. It's who we are. It's who we've been. It's who we're going to continue to be, God willing. That's what's called the full faith and credit of the United States. Let's be clear, raising the debt limit is paying our old debts. It has nothing to do with new spending or what may be coming this year or other years. It has nothing to do with my plans on infrastructure or building back better, both of which are paid for, but they're not even in the queue right now. So they're paid for. I mean, he put on a suit jacket that he hasn't worn in a couple of years, reached in the pocket and goes, oh, I found an extra 3.5 trillion. And by the way, that's a smoke and mirrors. If you look at the bill, they moved around a bunch of stuff, and it's actually going to cost more than $5.5 trillion. So they were able to hide $2 trillion of this spending. And it is so magnanimous of them to be able to just spend all of this on us to save us always from certain death if they didn't spend all of this on us. But how do they pay for this? They borrow by issuing bonds that we end up paying for in taxes. So it's just a closed loop. They're charging it. They've got this credit card. The credit card supposedly has a limit, that is the debt ceiling, and they're charging it up. But who pays the credit card? We do in the future. So here's Yellen warning of a catastrophe if Congress doesn't handle the debt ceiling issue. And it says that the Senate approved a short-term extension of the debt ceiling, but it's going to be back to haunt us in December. So just expect another bunch of this distraction and just ignore it. This keeps on happening over and over again like a bad nightmare that you can't wake up from. So here's the debt ceiling, how it got to $28.4 trillion. Now remember, this is a ceiling that they're not supposed to be able to spend beyond. And they used to raise the debt ceiling, and then they would spend and spend and spend until they hit the debt ceiling, and then they'd start screaming and trying to scare us, and they'd raise it again, and they kept on spending and spending and spending, and they keep on raising it and spending and spending and spending, and then they raised it, and they kept on spending, but then they came up with this new trick. They suspend the debt ceiling. Now remember, debt is not something that goes up. This is a pit. You have to fill this with currency later. They're digging a pit in front of us. So it's really a debt floor, a fictitious floor, because that floor has a trap door in it, and they open that trap door at any time by suspending the debt ceiling. And now they raise the debt ceiling to whatever they have spent in the past. So here back in, I think that was 2019, they raised it up to 22 trillion, and then they suspended it, and they kept on spending and spending and spending, and they spent $6.4 trillion more than the debt ceiling. So you just saw the White House contradict themselves with their statement on what the debt ceiling is and how it works. Well, how it works. This is our level of prosperity that's determined by the goods and services that we all create for one another. It's the economy. And here we have the past, the present, and the future, and we're all sitting in this little digger here, and time never stops. This digger is moving forward at a constant rate. It cannot be stopped. And what we do is we go out into the future and we dig these pits. We dig a little bit of a pit with a 30-year bond, a 20-year bond, a 10-year, 7-year, 5-year. These are notes now. And then we get down to bills, and we dig these up. But remember, this never stops. So before we fall into this pit, we have to dig up some dirt and keep on piling it on top here so that we raise up the pit that's in front of us until it gets to at least level. But preferably what they do every year is they borrow more, leaving a much, much bigger pit out in front of us. And so to whom do we owe this huge pit? Well, let's take a look at this. So you go to fred.stlouisfred.org/category. There's all these categories you can look at, and I encourage everybody to do this. We've got federal government debt. Now, a few days ago, it said there were 6+ charts in here. Now it says there's 10+. So you click on this and you discover there's 39 charts in here. So yes, I will agree with the Federal Reserve that 39 is more than 10. At least they've got that right. So we take a look at all of these charts, and we have, there's the federal debt here. But there's different categories. So some of the breakdown. There's 22 and a third trillion of federal debt held by the public. Now the public breaks down into categories as well. So here we have private investors is 17 trillion, and here we have federal debt held by foreign and international investors at 7.2 trillion, which, by the way, if you divide this by GDP, is about a third of the U.S. economy. So if you took the entire U.S. economy you'd have to go for 4 months of that economy to pay back foreigners that have loaned currency back. And then there's the federal debt held by agencies and trusts. I always find this to be a crack up, because agencies and trusts, what are trusts? Well, the biggest one is the Social Security Trust Fund. It's a trust fund. You have to try. This is supposed to be like a savings account. They take this from you in taxes out of your paycheck. They force you to turn cash over to them, and this is going in your savings account. It's a trust fund. Trust us. We're good for it. And then they borrow against it. This is the amount of U.S. Treasuries that is held by these agencies and trusts. So almost 6.2 trillion are the IOUs that are left in your savings account for Social Security. They borrow the cash out of there, they add it to the general fund, and they spend it. And so these are some of the U.S. Treasuries that are issued, end up in our Social Security Trust Fund, the IOUs that you're going to retire on. How do we pay those IOUs? You do, through future taxes. I think it's just absolutely hilarious, this game that they're able to pull on everybody. And it's so complex that it gets everybody's heads spinning, and they just sort of lose track of it and go along with it. And it's a shame, because we are getting fleeced, basically. Federal debt held by the Federal Reserve. So how much of the federal debt do we owe the Federal Reserve that got to type currency into existence, counterfeit currency into existence, and buy the IOUs from the Treasury that we work in the future to pay taxes, to pay the principal and the interest on these bonds, bills, and notes back? And it's 5.6, I'm going to round, 5.65 trillion. And so we keep on going here. And so this is the whole enchilada. This is the enchilada with sauce and cheese on top. The whole enchilada is 28.529. Wait a minute, that's more than 28.4. Remember that the total debt outstanding can only be 28.4, but we're at 28.529 already, and that was established 75 days ago. So this is the federal government current tax receipts. So this is the income that they charge us to pay the 28.529 trillion. And now to close this, I'm going to read a little bit more. This is talking about the crisis that will happen. There's going to be a crisis someday. And so I wrote about this back in 2007. Investors may, in the short term, run where they've been taught to run for safety and buy U.S. bonds in a kind of knee-jerk reaction. But think about it this way. Would you loan a guy your life savings and take his IOU, knowing that the guy is promising a rate of interest that's half the real rate of inflation? That's what's happening now. It wasn't that way back when I wrote this, but that is what's happening. That he has been borrowing from everybody in town for more than 70 years. Well, this was 14 years ago, so you got to add 84 years. And that he has spent far more than he has borrowed for a majority of those. I suspect not. You wouldn't loan it to him, right? In this case, that guy is our very own government, and the last time it paid back more than it borrowed was 47 years ago. Now you got to add 14 to that. So it's 60, what is that? 61 years ago. It already owes more than 5 times its annual income. Well, if you take what we owe today, the whole enchilada, and you divide that by the current tax receipts, you come up with, instead of 5 times, when I wrote this, it's now almost 14 times the current tax receipts. And that's since, this was written just before the crisis of 2008. It's very pertinent today. I want to give you a free copy of this book, and it's really worth reading, because you will see the changes that have happened in the meantime, the stuff that is yet to come, and the stuff that has come to pass. So it owes 14 times its annual income through tax revenues. It's promised everybody in town that it will deliver goods and services to them that will cost more than 20 times its annual income. I didn't do the math on this yet, but what I'm talking about here is the unfunded liabilities. So that kid that was a kid born today owes about $90,000 to pay for what has already been spent. And so that is what the president was talking about, it's the debt ceiling is about being able to pay what we've already borrowed and spent, what's already owed. It has nothing to do with and that's true because they can just open up this trap door in the fictitious floor in the debt pit that we keep on digging for ourselves. It's going to end badly for everybody except precious metals investors and potentially cryptocurrency investors and a few others.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
What to do in such a situation? Inform yourself and keep your financial education strong. We from the Compact Group offer our loyal subscribers a free educational portal with first-hand monetary, financial, and economic knowledge. Enter our invite-only Insider Club by clicking the link below. You will get access to first-class information far earlier than the rest. We have prepared a special deal for all our members where you can access a giant pool of Robert Kiyosaki's financial wisdom for just $1. To find out more, simply click the link below and join our Insider Club absolutely free. But there is more you can and should do. Build up several streams of income. More and more people realize that they have to take their future in their own hands, but they don't know how and where to start. We from Compact offer our Insider Club members unique opportunities. Strengthen your financial muscle and get the edge. Click the link below. Become part of our free Insider Club. No financial obligations. But there's one important thing you have to know. You have to become active. So do it now. Become active and see you on the other side.